As you're listening to this lecture, you'll find the answer to this question. What are the different formats in which we can get responses from the Open Weather Map API? We have the basic setup for our webhook server code. All we need to do is to query the Open Weather Map API to get the weather report for a particular day in a particular city. Now, Open Weather Map freely offers weather information for the current day, for days in the past, and some days in the future to all developers, provided that you're within a certain free usage tier limit. You can get Open Weather Map data in JSON, XML, as well as HTML formats. In our case, since we're working with JSON, we'll continue to do so. We'll hit the JSON endpoint. Open Weather Map collects weather information from all over the world, from meteorological stations, from airports, what have you, and makes it available in an API format. It's extremely useful and interesting. We'll check it out here. Go to openweathermap.org. That's the website. And here you can see all the stuff that is available to us. Current weather and forecasts for your city. For example, you can see forecasts in London. There are other APIs that you can access. Many interesting things that you can explore at leisure. But what we're really interested in is the API that we can use to programmatically access the weather for a particular city. So click on the API tab on top there, and this will take you to all the different APIs that are available. You can see that you get current weather data, you can get 5-day forecast, you can get 16-day forecast, and so on. I'm going to go ahead and choose the 5-day forecast. So I'm interested in the weather of where I'm going to be only 5 days before I leave. That's the assumption here. It's a simplifying assumption, but it'll do for our purposes. There are a number of different ways that you can query the weather for the location that you're interested in, by city name, by city ID, by lat long, by zip code, and so on. Now, because we are set up to use the city name, that is the API that we'll use. Parameters which come in from Dialogflow already include the city name. We can directly pass it to the Open Weather Map API in order to get the weather forecast. Here is an example API call that you can use to get the forecast by city name. Here we are getting the forecast for London. Simply click on this link and you can go ahead and see what the forecast looks like. This is an XML format. We can simply delete mode is equal to XML, and by default, we'll get the result in JSON format. This is what we're interested in. Now, there is a lot of detail here, and you might want to take a little while to actually look at the format of the response. So, we have forecast for the next 5 days for every 3 hours within the day. There's all kinds of information here: the min temperature, the maximum temperature, the pressure, the sea level, the ground level, humidity, and a basic description of what the weather is basically going to be like. We'll switch back to our Python Flask code. We'll hit this API and retrieve the information in order to respond to our bot. We'll import the request library in our Python code. Now, if you don't have this library installed, you might need to explicitly install it if you run this code locally. But because we're going to run this code on the Heroku platform directly, you don't need to have requests installed. In fact, you don't need to have Flask installed. You can just assume that all these libraries are available on Heroku. This request library in Python makes it very simple to make HTTP requests to any URL. And we'll use this to make a request to the Open Weather Map API. So go to that position in your Python code where you actually need to make this external API call. We'll say request.get and specify the URL parameter. But what is the URL we are going to hit? The URL for the API that we saw earlier. So switch back to the browser window where you're set to Open Weather Map and simply copy paste this URL into your Python code. Access to this particular API requires an API key. An API key was generated by default when you clicked on the URL that we saw on the Open Weather Map browser page. This is the API key. You can either use this key directly or simply set up a new one for yourself. These API keys are freely available to developers, so there's no magic to getting one. If you don't want to use this API key, simply sign in and create an account on Open Weather Map. Go to API keys and copy paste your own key when you make this request to the Open Weather Map API. Now, this query is for the city London, but we want to query weather information for the city that was passed in as a parameter value. Simply delete the hard coded reference to London here and use the city available in the city variable. And if you explored Open Weather Map, you now know that this API can return information to you in the XML, JSON, as well as the HTML format.